Okay.
Right. So, Midsummer. Um,
Yeah.
so why don't you run me through your reaction to it again?
So, it's the weirdest fucking film I've ever seen.
Good.
No doubt.
I feel like I should be able to update that.
My initial reaction was just didn't like it. And I do still have gripes about it. There are definitely things I still have issues with. But once you had then said, like, it's supposed to be weird. It's supposed to be very uncomfortable. It's the whole point of it is to be that unsettling, horrific aspect. That sort of did sway me a bit because I did finish the film feeling very uncomfortable. And feeling very unsettled and being, like, what the fuck have I just watched? So in that aspect, it sets out to do exactly, and it achieves exactly what it sets out to do. So yeah, there's some fantastic cinematography. There's some amazing little setup bits, like basically the whole film, or certain plot points can be seen on the tapestries all over the walls.
Yeah, and as the first shot you see is that sort of tapestry that comes on like the entire
Yeah,
screen and just tells you the entire plot, and then the film opens after that, which is quite
yeah.
good.
It definitely went very strange ways.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really weird, really, really weird.
it's sort of. I think some people compared it to like a sort of an American version of The Wicker Man, which I think is probably a. Well, it's been a while since I've seen The Wicker Man. I think it's definitely got similar influences and
Yeah,
sort of
definitely, 100%.
style.
Like, I haven't seen. I mean, I've seen. There's a Nick Cage Wicker Man, isn't there?
There is, but we don't talk about that.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of bits of that, but I haven't seen the English one.
Yeah, the proper
Is
one.
it English? It is English, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's Scottish, arguably, I guess. But
Well,
well, I
fine.
mean, it's
The
set in
the
Scotland. It's a
the
British
British
film.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah. I haven't seen that one. It is good, but prepare your anus because it's the strangest thing I've ever seen.
yeah. So what I think is really interesting about Midsummer, and sort of about Ari Aster's work in general. So I won't talk too much about Hereditary because you haven't seen it, and that's
No.
another film that needs absolutely nothing revealed about it before seeing it, really. Plus, also, I have talked extensively about Hereditary on my blog. So if you want to read that, cinerambles.blogspot.com is where you need to go. But anyway, so Midsummer and Ari Aster's work in general, I feel, has sort of essentially reinvented horror for the new age. Because the thing is, if you think about most modern horror films, or at least, the most popular ones that you see in multiplexes,
Have been trash.
there's something that's distinctly unscary and unrealistic about them.
Yeah.
In the way that, like, a lot of people go see horror films for fun. They enjoy the thrill of it. It's like a
Yeah.
roller coaster to them rather than like something
So a lot of
horrifying.
them are like, it's just unbelievable that they managed to get a cinema at least, like, because they are so bafflingly stupid and bad in every single
Yeah.
way that it's like they stick them in the cinemas because people know, go to see them because they know they're going to be trash and stupid, and they think, and they do make money, which is a shame because that. I mean, I never go see a horror film in the cinema. Or, I mean, I saw The Invisible Man, but,
Yeah.
because I feel like,
But then, was that a horror film? We've had
well,
this discussion.
it was,
Yeah,
mostly.
somewhat.
But, I much prefer, I will go see a horror film that, a psychological horror film, or one that's not just, oh, here's a spooky man and a bunch of fucking idiots, watch them scream for an hour and a half.
Yeah. So that's the thing about modern horror is there's sort of two aspects to this. Firstly, they're almost certainly about something that's just inherently sort of silly and overdone. Like whereas like there's Annabelle films that just have like a creepy doll, and there was like The Nun,
Brahms.
and it's all very sort of like I call like artificial horror in the sense that it's something that even however scary it might be in the moment, we know doesn't exist and isn't real and can't hurt us, and ultimately it's all just a film. It's all just a thrill ride. And secondly, as it's been well documented, there's the sort of the over-reliance on jump scares. There's no actual horror atmosphere. It's all just about instant gratification, kind of like, oh, jump, I must be scared. which isn't really what horror is, which is why Ari Aster
Yeah.
stuff I find so interesting. Because on the one hand,
Yeah, because I've got to say about Midsummer, like going into it, and even during it, I never thought it was a horror film. Like, there's no jump scares at all, and it wasn't until you said it's a horror film did I actually then think, oh shit, yeah, it is a horror film. Now thinking about it, because it doesn't really fall into any other genre.
now this is interesting. So when you were watching it, what did you think of it as, or did you just not think at all?
I was expecting it to be like I don't know, like a thriller, sort of film, akin to. I mean, I don't really know because they all take loads of drugs, and I thought it'd be like this drugged out sort of.
Oh, you thought it'd be like a Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas kind of thing.
Yeah, like that kind of
Okay.
thing of the main Florence Pugh dealing with her past traumas while drugged out of her mind. I thought that's what it was going to be,
Yeah.
but it wasn't that at all.
Well, yeah. So this is the thing. It's Midsummer and Hereditary by some extent. Yeah, like you said, basically no jump scares at all. Ending of Hereditary is a different story. Again, I'll talk about this another time. But Midsummer certainly no jump scares at all. It's all about the atmosphere and this general undercurrent of just things aren't right, and it's a genuine like creeping sense of dread at all times, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. And it stays with you long after the Nun or Annabelle does, which is like immediately forgotten. It's actual genuine horror. And the second part of that, and why I think these films work so well, especially in this day and age, is because I think Ari Aster's managed to find a way to make sociological horror. So, for example, there's a key scene in Midsummer where Florence Pugh's boyfriend, I can't remember any of their names, but that's normal
Yeah,
for me.
the ginger one.
But him, he gets sort of taken off to one side and is sort of forced into having sex with this one girl as part of the cult. And so it's quite a long, extended scene. We keep cutting back to it where he's just there having sex with this girl, and like every other female in the village is standing around them making these noises.
They're all like all the weird naked old women who
all
are
naked,
singing and making noises, and it's so fucking weird.
And like another friend of mine was talking about this, and she said like that scene genuinely disgusted me, and I think this is the crux of it.
That scene made me laugh. Like the bit where one of the women like bends down and like holds the girl's hand, and then she starts like singing. Like I genuinely just burst out laughing because I found it so fucking funny. Like it was so weird and so completely out of left field. It just made me like laugh.
So I think that's interesting because my reading of this, and one of the reasons I think Midsommar works so well as a horror film, is it's sort of because that's sociological fear. There's nothing horrific or scary about it. But because we've been conditioned to have this sort of taboo feel about sex and seeing nudity, especially older nudity, we've been programmed to find that sort of disgusting and sort of weird and not right. But by using that in a film, it's not like a traditional horror image, but it's making horror and sort of uncomfortableness out of something that we're not used to being horror. But it's the fear of sort of social conformity. It's not socially acceptable to go around standing around people having sex in your starkers and holding their hands and singing, but we see it, and because it goes against our sort of social worldview and how we've been raised. It feels wrong. It feels horrific because it goes against what we've been conditioned to do in this society, and that's what I think Ari Aster does with his horror.
I did read a thing like that Ari Aster, he did say that he thought the whole thing was like a dark comedy. Like he wanted to make people laugh and I think, I mean, there were definitely bits that made me laugh, and I think it's the absurdity of every single situation that they're in is just funny. Like so the bit at the very end where they are in the house that's gonna be set on fire, and they give the he's like, oh, have the root of the vine tree and you'll feel no pain. that thing. And then the two blokes look at each other as one of them gets set on fire, and he starts screaming, and that one guy's just sat there like, right. Well, and and that like awkward look, and it just did give you a giggle, and it's like, this shouldn't be funny, but it's so completely absurd that it is amusing, and I think that was something that was I just didn't expect at all. That was really weird.
And speaking of the absurdity of it, I think a lot of my sort of reading of the film was based on absurdity, because basically, so I read it as a sort of a comment on American xenophobia. So
Okay.
What's interesting is about, like you said, there's this group of American teenagers who've gone to, I can't remember if it's Norway or Sweden. I think it's Norway.
It's Sweden, yeah. It's like really northern Sweden.
Yeah. Okay. So they're in Sweden, and they've come here to this like reclusive tribe, and they're imposing on them, and this tribe is doing nothing. I think this is what works and makes it sort of so scary. Is unlike in another horror film with, like, say, a slasher villain who means the protagonist harm and is actively trying to kill them. The cults in Midsommar aren't actively meaning them harm. Well, okay, maybe later on they do, but certainly to start with, the point is they're not mean them harm. They're the ones being imposed upon. They're just trying to welcome these American tourists into their custom. Yeah, but the thing is, they're all the things they're doing, which to us seem horrific and unearthly and inhuman. It's just the cultural gap from hell. To them, this is just how they live. This is their way of life. But to us, because we're so far removed culturally, it seems horrific. It seems disgusting, and that's why I think it's sort of, that's the comment on xenophobia. It's sort of this idea Americans sort of see these other cultures, and there's sort of this fear of this other culture because they don't understand it because it's so distant from what they're used to. But it's just as valid. It's just that's how someone else lives.
I mean, that's an interesting point as well, because I feel like if this was, because it is set in Sweden and all the people are white, but I feel like that xenophobia angle would be a lot more prevalent if this was set in Asia or in Africa or whatever, with a different type of tribe. But because it's in Sweden, and Sweden is, a first world country who is, everyone thinks is relatively normal and westernized, and
Scandinavia is like known for being like, top of the world in like all the main social areas. They've got like the best education system. They've got like this great economy. They seem to be flourishing socially.
I think Sweden's frequently like, one of the top 3 the happiest places to live in the world or something like that.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's like, especially Americans in particular, have this sort of idyllic image of like Europe, and going to Europe is this place of like arts and culture and stuff. Yeah. And I like the idea of like that myth then being smashed by going in Midsommar, and there's this nightmarish hellhole. But the other great thing about it is like so many horror films rely on like the dark and sort of like
I was literally just about to say that. Yeah,
and it's like basically every scene is in daytime, and it's great. It's set in an open field, and yet you've never felt so trapped in your life. And that takes such skill to do.
Yeah, that's what I absolutely love. Like, so it's set in a part of Sweden where during the summer it only gets dark for, I believe it's 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
So, and that's from, like midnight to 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And that's it. And then the rest of the time it is blazingly light. And I thought that was just absolutely amazing. Like, there's one sequence that's set in the dark, and that's about it, and the rest of it is completely in the light, and you just never see a horror film like that. And I thought that aspect of it is done so incredibly well.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said all my points, but Midsommar is just such a great film. It is. I do think it needs rewatching. I want to watch it again because I think.
So I do have a gripe about it, right?
Yeah.
So there were the couple of things I did have to say about it. It sort of feels unjustified in a way, like the very, very grisly deaths of the people feel quite unjustified.
Yeah,
and I know that's almost the point, but I feel like they could have done more to make it so that the when the people die. So there's the Eyebrows Kid is in it, who's Will Poulter.
The Eyebrows Kid.
Eyebrows Kid. Everyone knows who the Eyebrows Kid is. Eyebrows Kid. He's a bit of an asshole. He only wanted to go there to get high and bang chicks, and he pisses on the ancestor tree, and he's very like ignorant American tourist about the whole deal. and he dies in a very, very, very horrific way. And I was like, he was a bit of an asshole, but that doesn't feel justified at all. You know, I was
then,
like, I suppose that is an aspect of the horror, I guess. But I just feel like they could have made the Americans more assholey, so when they died, it wasn't as it felt more justifiable.
yeah.
I guess that was like a little gripe I had about it.
Like, my main defense for that is like going back to the whole sort of, cultural separation from hell. Like, we see, when the people in that cult reach the end of their life, they jump off this cliff, and then if they don't die, then they have to smash their face in with a hammer, which to us seems, excessively gory and violent.
The mercy hammer.
Yeah, but to them, that's just how they end lives. So to them, again,
Yeah.
they might not even think they're doing anything too out of the ordinary. I might be like, that's just how that's just how he approached punishment. Pull their lungs out.
Yeah, that bit was
yeah.
it was great. So what? This isn't a gripe. I'll get back to my other gripe in a second. But
Okay.
another thing I really liked was there's loads of subtle camera fuckery.
Oh, you're talking about the
So like
what's it called?
The feast, all the food is wibbly, and
Yes.
and when Florence Pugh is wearing her flower crown, one of the flowers is like gently pulsating, and all these tiny little bits when she sat on this throne, like the vines are gently moving and like growing, and it's like, see, I watched this with Georgia, and she didn't notice those things until I pointed them out. She's like, she was just so focused on the story. I couldn't stop looking at those things to the point where I wouldn't ignore a piece of dialogue because I was looking at the wibbly turkey on the table. Like, I just found that so distracting. But I thought, it was very cool because it shows how, fucked their minds are because of all the drugs. But I thought that was a really cool bit. It's done so subtly and so well.
So my sister does graphic design and sort of animation as her job. And I remember just before I saw the film, she saw it like a day before me, and she was saying like, "Watch out for the turbulent displace," which is what that's called.
Right.
But because she pointed it out, I couldn't stop noticing it. But yeah, it's a After Effects thing. But yeah, it is a cool effect. I do wonder if it's overused, but I do think it definitely adds to that sort of atmosphere and that sort of oppressiveness, because like everywhere you look there's this sort of movement, and it just makes you feel kind of slightly sick.
Yeah. So my other gripe with the film was it felt a little bit like, what's the point? It didn't feel like there was any sort of payoff. It sort of, I don't know. I just feel like it exists only to make you feel as uncomfortable as possible. Like, the story it told could have been, anything. Florence Pugh's character could have been anyone. I just feel like it wasn't, I don't know, character-wise, that none of them were really integral to the story. Even her, like, she, it could have been anyone. I mean, yeah, she's had the recent trauma, which doesn't help, but it was just weird. It just felt a little bit unsatisfying towards, which made me not really like it. Thinking back on it, I do like it more now, but just once the film had finished, I'd be like, okay, what was really the point of that?
I do think you have a point about the plot, yeah, because I think this is probably something that will become more clear, because overall Midsommar is a very sort of metaphorical film. I think it's a lot more about the subtext than it is about the supertext. So I did feel slightly unsatisfied that, as far as I could tell on the first viewing, it's like, where does Florence Pugh's character arc actually go? Like, what's she learned as such? But I figure on the rewatch, I think that will become more clear, but I can't confirm yet.
Right. Just because for me, if it sort of felt like Ari Aster wanted to make just the weirdest film he could, and he obviously wanted to make a film about a creepy cult, and it felt like it didn't really matter how he got the characters there, in what way he got there. He just wanted them to be there and then kill them off in a really grisly and disturbing way. It sort of felt like that. Like the first half an hour of the film where it's in America, I feel like that could have been axed, I guess. I don't know. It was like,
I think I disagree with that, because again, like going back to the whole, it's about sort of American xenophobia, and there's a sort of fetishization of like seeing other cultures, especially European ones, and like it's like, oh yeah, I want to go and see them and like write my dissertation on them. And I think without that scene in
Yeah.
America showing that, it wouldn't have that justification. I think that's a big part of the film and the
I
sort of
don't.
plot line.
Yeah, not that bit as much, but showing her parents and sister have this really, really grisly, bad, very traumatic death, and then having that basically never come up again. Like, yeah, she's got the trauma of it, and she occasionally sees them, but it doesn't really affect anything later on in the film.
Well, again, I don't have an answer for you now, but I have a strong feeling on the rewatch there'll be more to it. But
Right?
I mean, I can't say now, but yeah, I do think basically the film is way too smart to just not have things go anywhere. Like
Yeah,
Ari Aster has shown both in this and Hereditary, even though both are flawed, he definitely knows what he's doing to some extent. So I think there's definitely more to it that than it might at first seem.
yeah. What I did really like was her sort of transition into the cult.
Yeah.
Because the cult have this whole thing of like shared emotions, which is why when they have to mercy hammer the old man, everyone's like screaming and crying because they're like, oh, they're sharing his pain. And then when the ginger bloke's banging that girl, all the women are also screaming because they're like, oh, they're sharing the pleasure. And what I really liked, when
Oh, I know what you're talking
so
about.
when she sees her boyfriend banging that random girl, and then she goes back, she starts like lamenting. She's like screaming and crying, and all the other girls start screaming and crying with her. And I was like, this is really fucking weird.
See
But then,
that was the moment in the film. That's probably one that disturbed me the most. There was something about it was intensely uncomfortable.
yeah,
And
that bit in particular, I was just like, what the fuck is happening right now? But I think that was because, I don't know, we're taught to really like not show extreme emotions ever, and if you ever are that upset or that angry or whatever, you go away and you go into a room by yourself so you can hide it and let it out by yourself. That's always what we know. And to have,
and that's sociological conditioning again. It's that fear of breaking that rule. Yeah.
yeah, and then to have her screaming and crying there, and then to have the other people not judge her but join in and share those emotions with her was very, very strange and puts you on edge and is very uncomfortable to watch. But then, so what I was going to say about that, what I found interesting was very early on in the film, just after she's found out her parents and sister have died, you have her doing that same, lamenting, crying, where she's like screaming and just, uncontrollable emotions.
Yeah.
And her ginger boyfriend is just sat there like patting her head like, I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. Yeah. And you feel really bad for her and you're like, he's a shit boyfriend. And he is throughout a terrible boyfriend. He forgets her birthday, and his excuse was, I thought it was yesterday, which really pissed me off because I was like, that means you still forgot it. You fucking wanker. So yeah, and I felt that like there are occasional bits of humour in there, that I think are really good. But yeah, comparing that early on scene of her crying and having the boyfriend who just has no clue what to do and had no idea how to handle it, and all he does is like gently pat her because that's the only way he can think to comfort her. And then comparing that to later on with the girls who were just screaming with her, sharing the emotions. And I was like, that was her introduction to the cult, because I feel like at that point she finally feels like she's got someone or got some people to share her emotion and to share her grief. I was like, that
is an interesting analysis. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've just
that's a really good moment for me. Like, I thought that was a really good juxtaposition between those two scenes.
Yeah, and talking about, because I'd forgotten that opening, but now you mentioned it, going back to, again, like sociological conditioning and rule breaking of that opening scene, it was also really uncomfortable to watch him not help her or comfort her in any way. Like, it was awkward in a way that would be if you were there in real life. But it's interesting to see these two scenes, which are on polar opposite ends of like sort of the of how you deal with that situation. As on the one end doing literally nothing at all, and on the one hand like getting involved, and both feel horrifically awkward and uncomfortable. And it's interesting that it's like either end of that sociological conditioning, both are sort of big no-nos, and it's you have to find the happy medium. And I think that also, oh, this is probably getting too far, but like it's sort of it shows the delicacy of social interactions, that it's never all of one or the other. It's like I genuinely really struggle to comfort people who are upset. Like if people are upset, I just leave them alone because I don't know what I could possibly say to make them better.
Yeah.
And I like thinking about that. It reminds me of that tightrope of like how do you interact with those people? You can't ignore them, but you can't. What do you say to them? How do you I don't know.
Well, that's the thing, right? Because there is in ancient Greece, like, or at least in the epics, the way ancient Greek people would deal with grief was to lament. So they would cry, and they would, beat their chests, and they would just be miserable, and they would pull out their own hair, and that's
sort of
how they would deal with. Yeah, but they would do that. If you, so in the Iliad, when Achilles is there, and his lover Patroclus dies. He's obviously really upset, and he comes back, and he just tells his slave women, he's just like, lament for me, and they're like, oh shit, okay, and they all just start crying, and they start beating their chests, and they start, they lament for him, and like that is the way they show grief and respect for the dead, is just by being just crying and showing that emotion. And I was like, that scene in particular really reminded me of that, because these girls have no attachment to that at all. They aren't upset by it. They are just sharing her emotions and crying with her. I was like, that scene in particular actually really sold me on it. I don't know why. That like that crying bit, it made me like this film. I don't know why, but I just thought that was such a clever little thing.
It'll be interesting to compare the response to this film from like introverts versus extroverts. Like I wonder if, because again, it's all about social conditioning, all that. I wonder if that therefore means it has like a stronger effect on introverts who are more afraid of breaking social boundaries, while maybe extroverts might just be unfazed by it because they're used to sort of just being free and fast. Or is that, are extroverts free and fast as social rules, or is it because they obey them so well?
I don't know. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Do you think? I think they're more.
I mean, I'm very much an introvert, so
yeah, exactly. But I think extroverts are so good at fitting into the norms that they would be more freaked out by it.
Interesting, but then
possibly, I don't know.
But I think, I mean, at least as an introvert, my definition of introversion is the like abject fear of being socially not in line, and any sort of deviate at all from what's considered socially acceptable should be met with like massive embarrassment and shame, and therefore I sort of seclude myself from interacting any more than I have to in a lot of situations, because it's better to not act at all than to act out of step, or at least that's my definition of introversion.
I see, but I mean, well, I think that's slightly different. I don't know. I mean, that's probably a type of introvert, but for me, I feel like I'm introverted.
I mean, that's just social anxiety, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, because I'm introverted, but only because I choose to be, because I can't be bothered to go out, or, I can't be bothered to go and interact with people. But if I want to, I can, and I can handle being in public, like, it's fine. Yeah. But also, I don't know, like, I think because extroverts fit into the norms.
Yeah.
I feel like something that's this far left field would just throw them off entirely.
Yeah.
But that is an interesting question. That's an interesting point. It's unfortunate we don't know any extroverts to ask them.
And to bring this to sort of a conclusion, I think going back to what I said at the beginning about this is true horror, because horror is an intensely personal experience. And like in the same way, horror and comedy are on the same side of the same coin. Wait, that's not it. It's horror and comedy are different sides of the same coin.
They're the same side of different coins.
Anyway, I can't remember who said that. It may have been Sam Raimi. But yeah, like in the same way, like what makes you laugh is so subjective. What scares you is also subjective. And like going back to things like The Nun or Annabelle, which are just cheap jump scares. Jump scares are cheap because it doesn't affect you on a personal level. Everyone will react the same to a jump scare because that's just triggering a fight or flight response. It's not difficult.
Yeah, isn't it? It's Yahtzee Croshaw of Zero Punctuation fame said jump scares are to horror what fart jokes are to comedy.
Yeah, exactly. But then this
Yeah.
so something like Midsummer is true horror because, and like, look at us, we were discussing this on a subjective level. We're discussing our personal psychoses and sort of tics and how we work and how the film affects us personally, and how's what the different reactions we've had to it based on our differing personalities. And we're quite similar people, but
Yeah.
even so, we've had sort of deviant responses to an extent because there are subtleties in our personality which change how we interact with this film. And I think that proves
Yeah.
once and for all how great this is as a film and how such a
I do
seminal
think,
piece
like,
of horror.
thinking back on it and having this conversation does make me like it a lot more.
Yeah,
Because I think there's a lot more watching it, and then, watching it, if I had this sort of gut reaction to not like it, but I think that's probably the point. But then talking about it, there's so much brilliance going on there. There's so
yeah.
many clever things. There's so many like genius ways of storytelling that I think it's really, really, really well done. And I think
Yeah.
it's excellent. And I have got to say that I do actually like it. Yeah.
And when I first watched it, I also I felt sort of like I don't really know what to think of this, and it's one that's definitely grown on me as the years apart, as the years like 1 year has passed. But it's definitely one that's grown on me over time, I think. But yeah, I'm so excited to see what Ari Aster does next, because I mean,
It makes me want to watch. Is it The Witch?
oh, The Witch is also fantastic. It's not Ari
Because
Aster,
that's a
but
bit like culty, isn't it?
The Witch is one of those rare films where I watched it and it was like instantly a favourite of mine. Like it was everything I like in a film, especially a horror film.
Right.
But that's Robert Eggers who did The Lighthouse,
Yeah.
which I think is similar-ish to Midsommar in some ways. And I know you want to watch, and if you can get
do
around
want to
to
watch.
seeing it at some point, I think we get a good discussion out of that as well.
Yeah.
Because I think that's horror in a very similar way, where it's about sort of, I mean, it's about isolation, but I think there's also a tint of that sort of sociological stuff in there as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.